The cargo ship Crimson Dawn moved through the darkness of space like a slow-moving whale. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his chair on the bridge, watching the stars pass by on the screen in front of him. He had been running supply routes for 12 years now, and this trip was supposed to be simple. Medical supplies to the outer colonies. Nothing dangerous, nothing that should attract attention. Lisa Chen, his navigator, checked their position for the third time that hour. She was always careful, always double-checking everything. That's why Jake trusted her. Danny Wright, the chief engineer, called up from the engine room to report that everything was running smooth. The ship carried 15 crew members total, all experienced, all good people. But this trip was different because they had passengers. Carlos Rodriguez and his wife Maria sat in the passenger cabin with their 7-year-old daughter Emma. The little girl pressed her face against the window, watching the stars with wide eyes. She had never been in space before. Her parents were moving to the colony world of New Perth to start a new life. In the cabin next to them, 2 teenagers tried to sleep. Sophie Bennett was 16 and her brother Lucas was 14. They were traveling alone to meet their uncle on New Perth. Their parents had died in an accident 6 months ago, and now they were starting over somewhere new. Jake checked the time. They would reach the colony in another 30 hours. He stood up and stretched, thinking about getting some coffee. That's when the alarm started screaming. Lisa's hands flew across her controls. Her voice was tight with fear. "Captain, we have 3 ships coming in fast. They just appeared on sensors." Jake dropped back into his chair. "IF signals?" "Nothing. They're not responding to hails." Lisa's screen showed 3 red dots moving toward them at high speed. "They'll intercept us in 2 minutes." Danny's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, those are Krath ships. I'm reading weapons signatures." Jake's blood went cold. Everyone in space knew about the Krath. They were slavers, pirates, creatures that looked like walking lizards with cold eyes and colder hearts. They raided ships on the edges of civilized space, taking prisoners to sell in markets that decent people pretended didn't exist. "Battle stations," Jake ordered. His crew moved fast, but they all knew the truth. The Crimson Dawn was a cargo ship. They had defensive shields and a couple of old plasma cannons. Nothing that could fight off 3 Krath warships. Jake opened a channel on the emergency frequency. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Crimson Dawn. We are under attack by Krath raiders. Our position is..." He rattled off their coordinates, knowing that help was too far away to matter, but he had to try. The Krath ships opened fire. The first blast hit their shields and made the whole ship shake. Sparks flew from a control panel. Lisa held on to her station as the lights flickered. "Return fire," Jake ordered. Their small guns fired back, but the shots just bounced off the Krath shields. It was like throwing rocks at a tank. Another blast hit them, and this time the shields failed. The third shot tore through their hull on the port side. Air started rushing out before emergency systems sealed the breach. Danny's voice was strained. "We've got hull damage on decks 2 and 3. I'm rerouting power, but we can't take many more hits." Jake knew they had only one choice. "All crew prepare to repel boarders. Get whatever weapons you can find." In the passenger cabin, Carlos held Maria and Emma close. He could hear the explosions, feel the ship shaking. Emma was crying and Maria whispered prayers in Spanish. Carlos looked around for anything he could use to protect his family. He found a metal rod from a broken chair. It wasn't much, but it was something. Sophie grabbed Lucas and pulled him toward the back of their cabin. "Stay behind me," she told her brother. Lucas was scared, but he nodded. Sophie picked up a fire extinguisher from the wall. If someone came through that door, she would fight. The Krath ships latched onto the Crimson Dawn with magnetic clamps. Jake heard the sound of cutting torches on the outer hull. They were coming in through the cargo bay. He grabbed a plasma welder from the toolkit and headed down with his crew. When the Krath broke through, Jake and his people were waiting. The first alien through the hole was tall, covered in green scales, with yellow eyes that saw the humans as nothing more than meat. Jake fired the welder at its face. The creature screamed and fell back, but more came behind it. 10, 15, 20 Krath warriors pushed through the breach. They carried electric prods and neural nets. They weren't trying to kill. They wanted prisoners alive because dead prisoners couldn't be sold. Jake's crew fought hard. One crew member smashed a Krath with a metal pipe. Another threw acid from the chemical stores. But the Krath were bigger, stronger, and better armed. One by one, the humans went down. Jake felt something hit his back and pain exploded through his whole body. He fell to his knees, every muscle locking up from the electric shock. Through blurred vision, he saw his crew being dragged away in nets. He tried to stand, tried to fight, but his body wouldn't respond. The Krath commander walked through the cargo bay. His name was War Prime Thask, and he had been raiding ships for 40 years. He looked at the humans with interest. Humans were rare out here. They would bring good prices at the markets. Search the whole ship, Thask ordered in his hissing voice. Take everything valuable. Take all the crew. The Krath soldiers moved through the crimson dawn. They found Carlos, Maria, and Emma huddled in their cabin. Carlos swung his metal rod at the first soldier, but another one hit him with an electric prod. He dropped twitching. Maria screamed as they grabbed Emma. "Mommy!" Emma cried out, reaching for her mother. The Krath pulled them apart. They dragged all three into the corridor. Emma was crying so hard she could barely breathe. Maria was shouting, fighting against the nets, trying to get to her daughter. In the other cabin, Sophie tried to spray a Krath soldier with the fire extinguisher, but there were too many of them. They grabbed her and Lucas, wrapping them in the neural nets that made their whole bodies go numb. Thask walked through the ship, counting his prizes. 15 crew members, 2 adults and 3 children. The children made him pause. Human children were extremely rare in the slave markets. They would be worth more than everything else combined. Far away on a space station called Covenant Prime, the Galactic Council received Jake's distress signal. The council was made up of representatives from 40 different alien species. They met in a huge chamber with seats rising up in circles like an ancient arena. Ambassador Keller of the Vryn stood up when he heard the report. The Vryn looked almost human except for their silver skin and large black eyes. Keller had been on the council for 60 years and he remembered things that other species had forgotten. The Krath have taken a human ship, he announced to the chamber. They have captured crew members and passengers, including children. Some of the council members shifted uncomfortably. The slave trade was supposed to be illegal, but everyone knew it still happened in the dark corners of space. Most chose to ignore it. A representative from the Torvian Empire spoke up. This is unfortunate, but the Krath operate outside our jurisdiction. What can we do? Keller's voice was sharp. We can follow our own laws. Bring up Protocol 7. A very old creature named Thomas, who looked like a floating jellyfish made of light, accessed the Council's ancient records. Thomas belonged to a species that lived for thousands of years. He remembered when humans first joined the galactic community 30 years ago. The protocol appeared on screens throughout the chamber. Most had never read it before. It was short and clear. Should any hostile force capture, harm, or attempt to enslave human children, the Council will issue one formal warning. No second warning will be given. Humanity's response to such violations will be considered justified self-defense under Council law. The chamber went silent. Several representatives looked confused. Others looked worried. Why such a specific protocol? Someone asked. Keller answered quietly. Because humans made it very clear when they joined the Council. They said they would accept many things, tolerate many differences, but their children were a line that could not be crossed. We agreed, we made it law. The Council voted quickly. They would send the warning to the Krath as the protocol required. Keller himself recorded the message. His words were formal and cold. This is Ambassador Keller of the Galactic Council. You have violated Protocol 7 by capturing human children. Release all prisoners immediately. This is your only warning. The message was sent across all frequencies marked with the highest priority codes. On his flagship, Thask received the warning. He read it once, then laughed. It was a dry hissing sound. In 40 years of raiding, he had received hundreds of warnings. Nothing ever came of them. The Council talked but never acted. He ordered his fleet to proceed to Dracor Station, a lawless place in the outer reaches where anything could be bought or sold. The humans would make him rich. On Earth, in the city of Geneva, Admiral Helen Cross sat at her desk at Fleet Command headquarters. She was reading reports when the priority message came through. An aide handed her the decoded distress signal from the Crimson Dawn. Cross read it twice. Her face showed nothing, but her hands gripped the paper hard enough to wrinkle it. She picked up her phone and made 3 calls. 1 to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 1 to the Colonial Defense Force, 1 to the President of Earth. Then she essay. Admiral Helen Cross stood in the command center deep beneath Geneva. The room was built like a bunker, designed to survive anything. Giant screens covered the walls, showing maps of human space, positions of every ship in the fleet, and data streaming in from colonies across a dozen star systems. The Joint Chiefs of Staff arrived within the hour. General Marcus Webb commanded the Colonial Marines. He was a big man with scars on his face from the border wars. He looked at the report from the Crimson Dawn and his jaw tightened. "How long since the Council sent their warning?" he asked. 14 hours, Cross replied. "The Krath haven't responded. Our intelligence says they're heading to Dracor Station. They'll arrive in about 60 hours. A video screen flickered to life. President Catherine Morgan appeared, calling in from Washington. She looked tired, but her voice was firm. "Bring them home, Admiral," the president said. "All of them. I'm authorizing full fleet mobilization. Use whatever force is necessary." Cross nodded. "Understood, Madam President." The orders went out on encrypted channels. Across human space, from Earth to Mars to the distant colonies, ships began to move. Crews scrambled to their stations. Weapons were loaded. Engines powered up. At Luna shipyards, the massive battlecruiser Phoenix broke away from its test run. The ship was new, fresh from the construction docks, but its crew was experienced. Captain Stephen Blake had fought against pirates and raiders for 20 years. When he received his orders directly from Admiral Cross, he didn't hesitate. "Set course for Dracor Station," he told his navigator. "Maximum speed." The Phoenix was big, carrying enough firepower to level a small moon. Its railguns could punch through almost any shield, and its missile batteries could overwhelm any defense system. 800 crew members worked on that ship, and every single one of them knew what they were going for. From Mars orbit, 3 destroyers detached from patrol duty. The Valiant, the Defiant, and the Relentless formed up in a tight formation. Commander Amy Foster took command of the small fleet. She was known for being smart and ruthless in combat. Her plan was simple: get to Dracor Station before the Krath and set up an ambush. "Those children don't have much time," she told her crew. "We're going to make sure they come home safe." The destroyers pushed their engines hard, racing through space faster than they were supposed to go. The engineering crews worked overtime to keep the systems from overheating. At Tau Ceti Colony, the carrier Washington launched from orbit. It was a floating city, massive enough to carry thousands of people and 2 full wings of fighters. Admiral James Chen commanded the Washington. He had served under Cross years ago and learned from the best. The Washington brought 6 frigates with it as escorts. Together, they formed a battle group that could take on almost any enemy. The fighter pilots climbed into their cockpits, running system checks, eager to fly. But the most dangerous response came from a place that didn't officially exist. Deep in the Kuiper Belt, far from Earth, hidden among the ice and rock, there was a military base. No civilian had ever seen it. Most governments didn't admit it was there. Colonel Frank Hayes commanded Ghost Battalion, the most elite special operations unit in human space. His soldiers were trained to do impossible things in impossible places. They had fought on a dozen worlds, always in secret, always without recognition. Hayes selected 40 operators for the mission. They were the best of the best. Each one had skills that regular soldiers couldn't match. They loaded into a ship called the Wraith, a stealth corvette that could become invisible to sensors. "Here's the situation," Hayes told his team. 15 crew, 3 children, all in enemy hands. The fleet will hit them hard, but we're going in first. We get those people out before the shooting starts." The operators checked their weapons in silence. They didn't need speeches or motivation. The mission was enough. On Earth, the news networks learned about the kidnapping. Emma Rodriguez's face appeared on every screen. Her school photo showed her smiling, missing her 2 front teeth. Sophie and Lucas Bennett's pictures came next. The news anchors talked about the Krath, about slavers, about children stolen from their families. People were angry. Protests formed outside alien embassies. Crowds gathered in city squares, holding signs demanding action. The message was the same everywhere: bring our children home. Some aliens living on Earth reported feeling scared. They hadn't done anything wrong, but the anger was real and dangerous. Police had to protect several embassies from mobs. At Dracor Station, a creature named Krell prepared for the auction. Krell was a Torvian, which meant he looked like a slug with too many eyes and tentacles for arms. He ran the station, controlling everything that happened there. When he heard the Krath were bringing human prisoners, especially children, Krell saw profit. He sent messages to his richest clients across the galaxy. Rare specimens, his messages said. Human children. Once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Rich beings from a dozen species sent replies saying they would attend the auction. Some wanted the children as servants. Others wanted them for worse reasons. Krell didn't care as long as they paid. The Galactic Council watched Earth's mobilization with growing worry. Ambassador Keller tried to call Admiral Cross, hoping to work out a peaceful solution. His calls went to voicemail. Cross had no interest in talking. The Council held an emergency meeting. Some members wanted to send peacekeepers to stop what they feared would become a massacre. The humans are overreacting, a Torvian representative said. They're mobilizing their entire fleet for 15 people. Keller stood up, his silver skin reflecting the lights. 18 people, he corrected. And 3 of them are children. The humans told us 30 years ago what would happen if anyone touched their children. We agreed, we made it law. Now we watch and learn if they meant what they said. A vote was called to send peacekeepers. The Vryn delegation blocked it. We gave them one warning, Keller stated. Humanity is following the protocol we all agreed to. We will not interfere. On the Krath flagship, Thask sat in his command chair, watching his warriors prepare the human prisoners for sale. The adult crew members were locked in one cargo hold. The children were separated and put in special cells. Thask's officers were excited about the profits. They had already spent their shares in their minds planning what they would buy. The humans have sent a fleet, one officer reported. Our sources say multiple ships are converging on Dracor Station. Thask waved a clawed hand dismissively. Let them come. By the time they arrive, the prisoners will be sold and scattered across the galaxy. The humans will never find them all. His officers laughed. They had raided dozens of species over the years. Sometimes the victims sent ships to chase them, but the Krath always escaped. Their ships were fast and they knew how to disappear into the dark corners of space. In the holding area of the captured Crimson Dawn, Jake Morrison tried to keep his crew calm. They were all locked in the cargo hold, sitting on the floor with energy shackles on their wrists. The shackles would shock them if they tried to remove them. Jake could see fear on his crew's faces, but also anger. Lisa Chen sat against the wall, her eyes closed, probably running calculations in her head even now. Danny Wright kept testing his shackles, looking for weaknesses. But Jake's attention kept drifting to the corner where Carlos Rodriguez sat with his wife Maria. They should have had Emma with them, but the Krath had taken her away. Maria was crying quietly. Carlos stared at the wall with empty eyes. We'll get her back, Jake said, though he didn't know if it was true. Someone will come for us. Carlos looked at him. Who? We're in the middle of nowhere. By the time anyone finds us, Emma will be gone. Jake wanted to argue, but he couldn't. The man was right. Even if Earth sent ships, they would arrive too late. In another part of the ship, Emma Rodriguez sat in a small cell with a transparent wall. She could see other children in cells around her. Most were from alien species she didn't recognize. They all looked scared. An older girl in the next cell tried to talk to her. The girl had blue skin and large eyes. She spoke in broken English. Don't cry. Crying makes it worse, but Emma couldn't stop crying. She wanted her mom and dad. She wanted to go home. She didn't understand why this was happening. Sophie and Lucas Bennett were in cells across from Emma. Sophie pressed her hands against the transparent wall, trying to stay strong for her brother. Lucas was shaking, his fear making him sick. Sophie, what's going to happen to us? Lucas asked. Sophie didn't answer because she didn't know. She had heard stories about slavers, about what happened to people who were sold. She couldn't tell her brother those stories. The Wraith moved through space like a ghost, its stealth systems hiding it from every sensor. It had already reached the Dracor station system and was waiting, invisible, 2 kilometers from the station. Colonel Hayes and his team studied the station's layout. Intelligence had provided detailed maps, showing every corridor, every room, every way in and out. Hayes divided his 40 operators into 4 teams. Lieutenant Chris Morgan would lead the extraction team, 8 operators who would go in and get the prisoners. Sergeant Rachel White commanded support, whose job was to create chaos and draw attention away from the extraction. Sergeant Kyle Brooks led demolition, and their mission was simple: destroy the Krath ships. Captain Nina Cole took the Overwatch team, snipe. The Krath fleet arrived at Dracor Station exactly on schedule. 7 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, with the captured Crimson Dawn being towed behind them like a trophy. The station was huge, a mess of metal and composite materials built around a dead star. Ships came and went constantly because no one asked questions here. Krell watched the Krath ships approach on his monitors. His many eyes gleamed with excitement. The auction would begin in 6 hours. He had already received confirmation from 20 potential buyers, some of the richest beings in the galaxy. They were coming for the human children. Thask's flagship docked first. The War Prime stepped onto the station with his guards around him. Krell met him personally, his tentacles waving in what passed for a greeting among his species. "Welcome, War Prime," Krell said in his wet, bubbling voice. "Your reputation precedes you. I trust the merchandise is in good condition." "See for yourself," Thask replied. He ordered his guards to bring the prisoners. The Krath soldiers dragged Jake Morrison and his crew through the station's dirty corridors. The air smelled bad, like rot and chemicals mixed together. They passed cells holding beings from dozens of species, all of them waiting to be sold. The despair was thick enough to feel. Emma Rodriguez walked between two guards, her small hand gripped tight by a Krath warrior. She tried not to cry, but tears ran down her face anyway. She could see her parents ahead of her, both of them struggling against their captors. "Emma!" Maria screamed when she saw her daughter. She tried to run to her, but a guard hit her with an electric prod. She fell, twitching. "Mommy!" Emma cried out. She tried to pull away from the guard, but he was too strong. Carlos lunged forward, rage making him strong enough to break one hand free from his shackles. He punched a guard in the face before 3 more tackled him. They beat him down with their weapons until he stopped moving. Jake and his crew tried to help, but they were outnumbered. The Krath guards shocked them into submission, dragging them deeper into the station. The prisoners were separated. The adult crew members went to a large holding area with other slaves. Jake counted at least 50 beings in that room, all of them defeated and hopeless. The children were taken somewhere else. Emma, Sophie, and Lucas were brought to a special section where younger prisoners were kept. The cells were smaller here, with transparent walls so buyers could inspect the merchandise. Emma was pushed into a cell by herself. The door sealed with a hiss. She ran to the wall and pressed her hands against it, looking for her parents, but they were gone. Other children stared at her from nearby cells. Most looked scared. Some looked dead inside, like they had given up. Sophie and Lucas were put in cells across from Emma. Sophie immediately went to the wall and tried to talk to the little girl. "Emma, look at me," Sophie said, trying to sound calm even though her heart was racing. "We're going to be okay. Someone will come for us." Emma just cried harder. She was 7 years old and alone in a cage, surrounded by monsters. She didn't believe anyone was coming. Lucas sat in the corner of his cell, hugging his knees. He was trying not to throw up from fear. Sophie wanted to comfort her brother, but she couldn't reach him through the wall. What none of the prisoners knew was that help was already there. The Wraith had been waiting in the darkness for 12 hours, completely invisible to the station's sensors. Colonel Hayes and his 40 ghost operators had been watching, planning, preparing. Hayes studied the station layout on his tactical display. Intelligence had given them good information, but being here in person showed details that maps couldn't capture. He could see guard patrols, security checkpoints, camera positions. "All right, here's how this goes," Hayes told his team leaders. "Morgan, your extraction team hits the children first. They're in section D7. White, your support team creates a diversion in the main market. Make it loud and messy. Brooks, you take demolition and plant charges on every Krath ship docked at the station. Cole, overwatch positions in the upper observation decks. Take out security personnel and clear paths for extraction." Lieutenant Chris Morgan nodded. His team was ready. They had practiced the extraction 100 times on the way here. "Time to insertion?" Hayes asked. 30 minutes, the Wraith's pilot replied. "The main human fleet will arrive in 10 hours. Hayes made his decision. "We go now. If we wait for the fleet, those kids might already be sold. We get them out before the shooting starts." The operators checked their weapons one last time. They wore black armor that absorbed light, making them nearly invisible in the shadows. Each one carried suppressed rifles, pistols, knives, and enough explosives to level a building. The Wraith extended a docking tube to a maintenance airlock on the dark side of the station, a section where no cameras watched and no guards patrolled. The operators moved out in complete silence, their boots making no sound on the metal floor. They split into their teams inside the station. Captain Cole and her snipers headed up, climbing through maintenance shafts to reach the upper levels. Sergeant Brooks and his demolition team went down, toward the docking bays where the Krath ships waited. Lieutenant Morgan led his extraction team toward Section D7. They moved through utility corridors that maintenance workers used, staying away from the main passages. Every movement was calculated. Every corner was checked before they crossed. Meanwhile, the main human fleet was still racing toward Dracor Station. Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of the Phoenix, watching the countdown timer. 10 hours until they arrived. It felt like forever. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission," the communications officer reported. "It's from Colonel Hayes." Cross's eyes widened slightly. Hayes was Ghost Battalion. If he was breaking radio silence, something was happening. "Put him through." Hayes's voice was calm and professional. "Admiral, Ghost Battalion is on station. We're going in for extraction now. Recommend you arrive ready for heavy combat. The Krath won't give up their prizes easily." "Understood, Colonel," Cross replied. "We'll be there in 10 hours. Try to leave some for us." Hayes actually smiled, though no one could see it through his helmet. "No promises, Admiral. Ghost out." At Dracor Station, Sergeant White and her support team reached the main market district. It was a massive open area filled with shops, bars, and trading posts. Hundreds of beings moved through the crowds, buying and selling everything from weapons to drugs to slaves. White gave hand signals to her team. They split up and moved to different positions. Each operator carried explosive charges and incendiary devices. On White's signal, they would turn this market into hell. In the upper observation decks, Captain Cole and her sniper team found perfect positions. The decks were mostly empty, used by rich beings who wanted to watch the station activity from above. Cole set up her rifle on a stand that would keep it perfectly steady. Through her scope, she could see security guards at various checkpoints. She marked each target and assigned them to her other snipers. When the time came, those guards would die before they knew what hit them. Sergeant Brooks and his demolition team reached the docking bays. The Krath ships sat in their berths like sleeping dragons. Brooks smiled behind his helmet. He loved his job. His team split up, each operator taking a different ship. They moved underneath the vessels, placing high-yield charges on engine cores and fuel tanks. The charges were powerful enough to tear the ships apart. Brooks made sure to use extra explosives on Thask's flagship. That one deserved special treatment. Lieutenant Morgan and his extraction team reached Section D7. 2 Krath guards stood outside the entrance to the children's holding area. They looked bored, not expecting any trouble. Morgan made a hand signal. 2 of his operators raised their suppressed rifles. The weapons made quiet coughing sounds. Both guards dropped dead before they could sound an alarm. The team moved to the door. One operator pulled out a hacking device and connected it to the lock. The device worked through the security codes in seconds. The door slid open with a whisper. Inside, Emma Rodriguez looked up from where she sat crying in her cell. She saw humans in black armor moving through the holding area. For a second, she thought she was dreaming. One of the operators came to her cell. He pulled off his helmet so she could see his face. He was young, maybe 25, with kind eyes. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said softly. "My name is Chris. We're United States Colonial Marines. We're here to take you home." Emma's eyes went wide. "You came for me?" "We came for all of you," Chris told her. He used a tool to override her cell door. It slid open. "Come on, we need to move fast." In the cells across from Emma, Sophie and Lucas saw the soldiers. Sophie started crying with relief. Lucas just stared in disbelief. Chris's team opened all the cells holding human children. Emma ran to them and they scooped her up. Sophie grabbed Lucas's hand and they followed the soldiers. "What about my parents?" Emma asked. "What about the crew?" "Another team is getting them right now," Chris promised. It was a lie. They were getting the children out first because children were the priority. The adults would have to wait. The extraction team moved fast, heading back the way they came with the 3 children in the middle of their formation. They had only gone 50 meters when alarms started screaming throughout the station. Someone had found the dead guards. The whole station went on alert. Security doors started closing. Guards ran through corridors searching for the intruders. Colonel Hayes, the Wraith drifted in the darkness 2 kilometers from Dracor Station, watching the chaos unfold. Inside the stealth corvette, Emma Rodriguez sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, her parents' faces filling her mind. She looked up at Colonel Hayes with wide, scared eyes. "What about my mom and dad?" she asked in a small voice. Hayes knelt down to her level. "We're getting them out too, sweetheart. I promise," he stood and spoke into his comm. "White Brooks Cole, Pull back to the Wraith. Morgan, prep for a second run. The ghost operators who had created chaos throughout the station began their extraction. Captain Cole and her sniper team climbed down from their positions, moving through maintenance shafts. Sergeant White led her support team through the burning market district, using the smoke and panic as cover. Sergeant Brooks and his demolition team faced the hardest escape. The docking bay explosions had drawn heavy security presence. Guards swarmed the area, searching for whoever had destroyed the ships. Brooks and his 4 operators hid behind cargo containers, waiting for an opening. One guard walked too close. Brooks grabbed him from behind, knife sliding between his ribs. The guard died silently. They moved like shadows, taking out guards one by one. By the time station security realized what was happening, Brooks' team was already gone, disappearing into the utility corridors. At Dracor Station's command center, Krell watched his business empire burning. Fires raged in 3 sections. 6 ships had been destroyed. Dozens of his security people were dead. And somewhere on his station, human soldiers were hunting. "Find them," he screamed at his security chief. "Lock down every corridor. Seal every airlock. I want those humans dead." But it was too late. All 4 ghost teams made it back to the Wraith within 20 minutes. The ship remained hidden, watching and waiting. Colonel Hayes reviewed the station layout again. "The adult prisoners are in Section C4. Security will be heavy now. We need a new approach." Lieutenant Morgan studied the maps. "What if we don't sneak in this time? We hit them hard and fast." Overwhelming force, Hayes considered it. Ghost Battalion usually worked in silence, but sometimes loud was better. He checked the time. The main fleet would arrive in 8 hours. "All right," he decided. "We go in heavy. Full combat load. We punch through their security, grab our people, and get out before they can organize a response." The operators prepared for the second assault. This time they brought heavier weapons, assault rifles, shotguns, grenades. They weren't trying to be quiet anymore. 9 hours after Ghost Battalion's first strike, the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. 15 warships appeared on sensors all at once, a coordinated arrival that had been planned down to the second. Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of the Phoenix, looking at the tactical display. Dracor Station showed up as a large blip on her screen, surrounded by smaller dots representing various ships. "Open a channel," she ordered. "All frequencies. Maximum broadcast." The communications officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Cross's voice was ice cold. "This is Admiral Helen Cross of the Earth Defense Fleet. We have come for our people. Dracor Station, you will immediately release all human prisoners to our custody. The Krath fleet will power down weapons and engines. You have 10 minutes to comply." On the bridge of the Krath flagship, War Prime Thask received the transmission. His ship was in orbit around the station, having undocked hours earlier due to the attacks. He looked at his sensors and saw 15 human warships advancing in attack formation. Thask had 7 ships. They were older models designed for raiding merchants and weak colonies. They had never faced a real military fleet in open combat, but pride and arrogance clouded his thinking. He had spent 40 years raiding, taking what he wanted, never facing real consequences. He couldn't believe these humans would actually attack. "Battle stations," he ordered his crew. "Charge weapons. These humans are bluffing." Thask sent a message back to the humans. "This is War Prime Thask. You are in neutral space. The Council has no authority here. Leave now or face destruction." On the Phoenix, Admiral Cross read Thask's reply. She looked at Captain Blake. "Your evaluation?" Blake was a veteran of 3 wars. He knew the Krath ships were inferior to human vessels in every way. "We can destroy them in under 5 minutes, Admiral." Cross nodded. She looked at the weapons officer. "Fire." The Phoenix's main railgun spoke first. Massive slugs of dense metal, accelerated to near-light speed, crossed the distance in seconds. The first Krath destroyer never knew what hit it. The railgun slug punched through its shields like they weren't there, tore through the hull and exited the other side. The ship broke apart in a massive explosion. The second Krath destroyer took 3 hits from different human ships. The coordinated volley shredded it to pieces. Bodies and debris scattered into space. Thask watched in horror as 2 of his ships died in the first 10 seconds. "Return fire," he screamed. "All ships engage the enemy." The Krath fleet opened fire with plasma cannons and missiles, but their weapons were old technology, easily defeated by human point defense systems. The Phoenix's defensive lasers shot down incoming missiles while they were still thousands of kilometers away. The destroyer Valiant targeted a Krath cruiser. Commander Foster's voice was calm and professional as she gave orders. Weapons free. Fire all missile batteries. 60 missiles launched from the Valiant in a single salvo. The Krath cruiser's point defense tried to stop them, but there were too many. 40 missiles got through. The cruiser disappeared in a ball of fire. The Relentless chased down a fleeing Krath frigate. The human destroyer was faster and better armed. Its railguns fired in a steady rhythm, each shot punching another hole in the enemy ship. The frigate's engines exploded and it began tumbling through space. From the carrier Washington, 2 wings of strike fighters launched. 120 small deadly crafts screamed toward the battle. Commander Amy Foster led the first squadron personally. All fighters weapons free, she ordered. Target the remaining Krath ships. No survivors. The fighters swarmed like angry bees. Their missiles and guns overwhelmed the Krath vessels. 2 more ships died in the first minute of the fighter attack. Task realized he had made a terrible mistake. His fleet was being destroyed. His warriors were dying. The humans weren't bluffing. They had come for blood. He tried to order a retreat, tried to jump to faster than light speed, but the fighters had targeted his engines specifically. Missiles slammed into the FTL drives, destroying them. Task's flagship was stranded in normal space. Surrender, one of his officers shouted. We must surrender. But it was too late for surrender. The humans wanted to send a message, and that message was written in burning ships and dead raiders. The Phoenix moved closer, its massive form blocking out the stars. Admiral Cross opened a direct channel to Thask's ship. War Prime Thask. Her voice was cold enough to freeze blood. You took human children. You were given one warning. You ignored it. Now you pay the price. The Phoenix's main batteries targeted specific points on the Krath flagship. The first volley destroyed the weapon systems. The second took out the engines. The third eliminated the shields. Each shot was precise, surgical, designed to leave the ship alive but completely helpless. When the barrage ended, Thask's flagship drifted in space, powerless and weaponless. His crew was alive but defeated. Around him, the wreckage of his fleet burned. Of 7 Krath warships, 6 were destroyed. Only the flagship survived, and only because the humans wanted it that way. At Dracor Station, Krell watched the battle from his command center. The human fleet had destroyed the Krath in less than 5 minutes. Now those ships were turning toward his station. Send a message, Krell told his communications officer. Tell them we'll release the prisoners. Tell them we surrender. But before the message could be sent, Colonel Hayes launched Ghost Battalion's second assault. The Wraith approached the station, no longer bothering with stealth. It docked at a main airlock and 40 operators stormed through. This time they didn't sneak. They moved in formation, weapons up, ready for a fight. Station security tried to stop them. The Ghost operators cut them down. Lieutenant Morgan led his team toward Section C4 where Jake Morrison and the crew were held. They moved fast, stopping only to eliminate guards who got in their way. A squad of Krell's best security forces tried to ambush them in a corridor. The fight was short and brutal. Ghost operators were trained to win, and they did. Every enemy died. The humans took only minor wounds. They reached the holding area where the Crimson Dawn's crew was imprisoned. Morgan's team blew the door with explosives. Inside, Jake Morrison looked up to see human soldiers in black armor. United States Colonial Marines, Morgan announced. We're here to bring you home. Jake couldn't believe it. He had thought they would die here or be sold as slaves. Now Salvation had arrived in black armor and carrying rifles. Where's Emma? Carlos Rodriguez demanded as soon as his shackles were removed. Where's my daughter? Safe on our ship, Morgan told him. Your family is together again in about 10 minutes. Maria sobbed with relief. Carlos pulled her close, both of them shaking. The Ghost operators led the crew through the station. They encountered more resistance, more guards trying to stop them. Each fight ended the same way. The humans were better trained, better armed, and fighting for something more. 3 weeks after the rescue, Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, looking down at Earth. The planet turned slowly below him, blue and white and beautiful. He had thought he would never see it again. Now here he was, home and safe. His crew had been through medical checks and long interviews with military intelligence. Everyone was cleared to return to normal life. Most of his people had taken leave. Some were talking about retirement. What they went through changed them in ways that wouldn't heal quickly. Carlos Rodriguez stood next to Jake, holding Emma's hand. The little girl looked different now. She smiled less. She had nightmares most nights. But she was getting better. Child psychologists worked with her every day, helping her process the trauma. Maria stood on Emma's other side, her arm around her husband. Tomorrow they would go home to California, to their house and their old life. They would try to move forward. Sophie and Lucas Bennett had already left, going back to their uncle on New Perth. The colony world was their home now. They refused to let the Krath steal their dreams. Sophie had told reporters that she wouldn't hide, wouldn't be afraid. Her brother was quieter, but he stood strong beside his sister. The news networks couldn't get enough of the story. The faces of Emma, Sophie, and Lucas were everywhere. The rescue mission played on every channel. People across Earth and the colonies celebrated. Admiral Cross tried to avoid the attention. She gave one press conference and then returned to work. When reporters asked about her decision to send the fleet, she kept her answer simple. They took our children, she said. We brought them home. That's what we do. Colonel Hayes and Ghost Battalion disappeared back into the shadows. Their mission remained classified. Their names were never released. Only a few people in the government knew what they had done, but those people made sure the operators received proper recognition in private. The aftermath rippled across the galaxy in ways no one expected. The Galactic Council held a special tribunal on Covenant Prime to deal with the Krath situation. War Prime Thask stood trial for his crimes. The evidence against him was massive. Records recovered from his flagship showed decades of raids, thousands of prisoners taken and sold. Species from 40 different worlds had suffered because of him. Ambassador Keller led the prosecution personally. He presented testimony from freed slaves, showed evidence of the Krath's criminal network, and demanded the maximum punishment under council law. Thask's defense was weak. He tried to claim he was following orders from his government. He said the slave trade was an accepted practice in Krath culture. None of it worked. The tribunal found him guilty of crimes against sentient beings. The sentence was life imprisonment on a council prison world. Thask would spend the rest of his days in a cell, powerless and forgotten. But the trial accomplished something more important. Thask's testimony, given in exchange for slightly better conditions, exposed the entire criminal network. He named names, revealed locations, provided details about slave markets throughout the galaxy. The Council used that information to launch a massive crackdown. Over the next 6 months, dozens of slave trading operations were shut down. Thousands of prisoners were freed. Criminal organizations that had operated for centuries were destroyed. Dracor Station never recovered. The damage from Ghost Battalion's attack was too severe. Krell tried to rebuild, but the Council seized the station and arrested him. He faced his own trial and received his own sentence. The station became a council facility dedicated to helping freed slaves return to their homes. The holding cells where children had been kept were torn down and replaced with medical centers. On Earth, the public reaction was powerful. People demanded stronger action against the slave trade. The government responded by increasing the military budget and expanding the fleet. President Morgan gave a speech at the United Nations that was broadcast across human space and sent to every council member world. She stood at the podium, her voice clear and strong. Humanity seeks peace, she said. We want friendship with all species. We want to trade, to learn, to grow together, but we will protect our own. We will defend our children. The Council gave one warning, and that warning stands forever. Anyone who harms a human child will face the full might of Earth's military. This is not a threat. This is a promise. The speech was translated into every major galactic language. Some species found it aggressive. Others found it admirable. But everyone understood the message. Several species that had viewed humanity as weak changed their opinions. Trade agreements multiplied. Defense pacts were proposed. The willingness to use overwhelming force to protect citizens, especially children, earned a respect that diplomacy alone never could. Ambassador Keller visited Earth personally 2 months after the rescue. He met with President Morgan and Admiral Cross in the White House. The meeting was cordial but direct. Keller presented the Council's official findings. Earth had acted within established protocols. The Krath had violated fundamental laws. The human response, while devastating, was legally justified. However, Keller added carefully, The Council is concerned. If every species responded to crimes with this level of military force, the galaxy could become unstable. Admiral Cross, sitting across the table from him, met his eyes. Then the Council should make sure crimes like this don't happen. We didn't start this fight, Ambassador. We finished it, Keller nodded slowly. The Council has authorized a new peacekeeping initiative, specifically targeting slave trafficking. Your actions provided the political will necessary to address a problem we ignored for too long. Perhaps some good has come from this tragedy. President Morgan spoke up. We hope this never happens again, but if it does, we'll respond the same way. Our people are not negotiable. Our children are not for sale. That message has been received, Keller assured her, across the entire galaxy. At military academies throughout human space, the Battle of Dracor Station became required study. Tactical instructors analyzed every aspect of the operation. Students learned about rapid fleet deployment, special operations integration, and the importance of overwhelming force. Captain Blake, promoted to Commodore after the battle, taught classes on coordinated fleet tactics. Commander Foster gave seminars on fighter squadron deployment. Their lectures were always packed with eager students. The crew of the Crimson Dawn faced difficult decisions about their future. Their ship had been damaged beyond repair during the initial Krath attack. The insurance payout was substantial, but it couldn't replace what they lost. Jake Morrison thought about retirement. He had enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life. But sitting still didn't suit him. After a month of thinking, he accepted a job training merchant crews in defensive tactics. No one else should be as unprepared as we were, he told his former crew. I'm going to make sure civilian ships can defend themselves. Lisa Chen joined him as an instructor. Danny Wright did too. Several other crew members signed on. They turned their trauma into purpose, teaching others to survive. 6 months after the rescue, the United Nations dedicated a memorial in Geneva. It was simple, just a stone pillar in a quiet park. The names of the Crimson Dawn's crew were carved into one side. Emma Rodriguez, Sophie Bennett, and Lucas Bennett had their names on the other side. Below the names, a single sentence was carved in large letters. They came home. At the dedication ceremony, Emma placed flowers at the memorial's base. She was 8 now, taller, stronger. The nightmares still came sometimes, but less often. She was learning to be a kid again. Cameras captured the moment. The image of Emma laying flowers spread across human space within hours. It became a symbol, a reminder of why the fleet had fought. In Krath territory, the aftermath was dramatic. The species' government collapsed under the weight of shame and internal rebellion. The old leaders who had supported the slave trade were overthrown. Reformist factions took power, promising to end slavery and seek peaceful relations with the galactic community. They released all remaining slaves, paid reparations to victim species, and begged for forgiveness. Whether the changes would last remained to be seen. But the old Krath dominion was broken, destroyed by their own arrogance and Earth's response. Other criminal organizations learned from the Krath's mistake. Raids on human vessels dropped to almost zero. The few pirates stupid enough to try found themselves hunted by human warships that crossed vast distances for revenge. The calculus had changed. Humans were no longer easy targets. They had a small fleet compared to some species, limited territory, fewer resources than the major powers, but they had proven they would use what they had without hesitation. Admiral Cross reviewed the final reports in her office at Fleet Command. She read the statistics one more time. 15 warships against 7 Krath vessels and a fortified station. Human casualties, 5 wounded, none killed. Enemy casualties over 2,000. Every human prisoner recovered safely. By any measure, it was a perfect military operation. But Cross knew the real success wasn't in the numbers. It was in Emma's smile, in Sophie's determination, in Lucas's recovery. It was in all the prisoners sleeping safely in their own beds. She closed the file and looked out her window. Night had fallen over Geneva. Above the city lights, stars shone in the dark sky. Somewhere up there, beings who might have seen humans as prey were reconsidering. The message had been sent. It had be. 5 years after the Dracor Station incident, the galaxy looked different. The slave trade that had operated in shadows for centuries was nearly extinct. Council peacekeepers, inspired by Earth's decisive action, had systematically dismantled the remaining criminal networks. Captain Jake Morrison stood in front of a classroom at the Merchant Marine Academy on Mars. 20 young people sat before him, all training to crew civilian ships. He had been teaching for 4 years now, and every class heard the same story on their first day. "The Krath took my ship because we weren't ready," Jake told them. "We had shields and a couple of guns, but we didn't have training. We didn't have a plan. When they boarded us, we fought with whatever we could grab. That's not good enough." He showed them footage from the attack, the parts that had been declassified. The students watched in silence as the Crimson Dawn was overwhelmed. 3 children were on my ship," Jake continued. "A 7-year-old girl and 2 teenagers. They got taken because I wasn't prepared to protect them. I won't let that happen to anyone else." His students learned defensive tactics, emergency protocols, and hand-to-hand combat. Jake made sure every merchant captain who graduated from his program knew how to fight. The galaxy was safer now, but safe wasn't the same as harmless. Lisa Chen taught navigation and tactical planning at the same academy. Danny Wright ran the engineering program. Together, they made sure the next generation of civilian crews would be harder targets than they had been. On Earth, Emma Rodriguez was 12 years old now. She lived a normal life in California, going to school, playing with friends, being a kid. The nightmares had mostly stopped. The fear had faded to a distant memory, but she hadn't forgotten. Once a year, on the anniversary of her rescue, she visited the memorial in Geneva with her parents. She would stand there reading the names, remembering the soldiers who came for her. This year was different. Admiral Cross was there too, attending the annual remembrance ceremony. Emma saw her and walked over, her parents following close behind. "Admiral Cross?" Emma said, her voice small but steady. Cross turned and saw the girl she had sent a fleet to rescue. Emma was taller now, growing up fast, but Cross recognized her immediately from the photos. "Hello, Emma," Cross said gently. "How are you?" "I'm good," Emma replied. "I wanted to say thank you for sending the ships, for bringing us home." Cross knelt down to Emma's level, even though the girl was almost as tall as her now. "You never have to thank me. That's what we do. That's what we'll always do." Carlos and Maria Rodriguez stood behind their daughter, both of them emotional. They had never met the Admiral in person before. "You gave us our daughter back," Maria said, her voice breaking. "We can never repay that." "You don't need to," Cross told them. "Seeing her happy and healthy, that's payment enough." On New Perth Colony, Sophie Bennett was 21 now, studying engineering at the Colonial University. Lucas was 19, working as an apprentice mechanic at the spaceport. They lived with their uncle and had built good lives for themselves. Sophie had become an advocate for stronger anti-trafficking laws. She gave speeches, worked with council representatives, and pushed for reforms. Her experience gave her words weight that politicians couldn't ignore. "I was there," she would tell audiences. "I saw the cells, the fear, the hopelessness. The council's new initiatives have saved thousands of lives. But we can't stop. As long as one being is enslaved, the work isn't finished." Lucas was quieter, but he supported his sister's work. He donated money to victim support organizations and volunteered at refugee centers. The trauma had changed him, made him more serious, but it also gave him purpose. The Battle of Dracor Station remained a topic of study and debate across the galaxy. Military historians analyzed Earth's response from every angle. Some praised the decisive action. Others criticized the level of violence used. At the Galactic Council, these debates continued. Some species argued that Earth had overreacted, that destroying an entire fleet for 18 prisoners was excessive. Others pointed out that the Krath had been warned and chose to ignore it. Ambassador Keller, now one of the senior members of the Council, defended Earth's actions whenever they were questioned. Protocol 7 was established with full Council approval, he reminded his fellow representatives. "We agreed to humanity's terms. They did exactly what they said they would do. The fault lies with those who thought the warning was empty. The Vryn had gained significant influence on the Council in the years since the incident. Their willingness to let Earth act had earned respect from species that valued strength and resolve. New trade agreements between Earth and Vryn worlds had strengthened both economies. Cultural exchanges brought Vryn students to human universities and human scholars to Vryn academies. The reformed Krath government worked hard to rebuild their reputation. They paid reparations to every species they had wronged. They opened their territory to council inspectors. They prosecuted their own people who had participated in the slave trade. It would take generations to erase the stain on their species, but they were trying. Some humans were willing to give them a chance. Others never would. War Prime Thask died in prison 3 years after his capture. The official report said it was natural causes, but rumors suggested otherwise. Prison was dangerous for slavers, especially ones whose crimes had caused so much pain. Nobody mourned him. His name became a warning, a cautionary tale told to would-be criminals across the galaxy. The human fleet had grown in the 5 years since Dracor Station. New ships rolled out of Luna shipyards every month. The Colonial Defense Force expanded to protect the growing number of human settlements. But the fleet's purpose had evolved. It wasn't just about defense anymore. It was about deterrence. The mere existence of Earth's military power prevented conflicts before they started. Admiral Cross, now approaching retirement, watched the fleet grow with pride and concern. Pride because humanity was strong. Concern because strength could breed arrogance. She gave a speech to graduating officers at the Naval Academy, wanting to share wisdom earned through decades of service. The Battle of Dracor Station was necessary, she told them, but it should never have happened. Our goal isn't to fight wars. Our goal is to make wars unnecessary. We showed the galaxy what happens when someone crosses our lines. Now we maintain those lines through readiness, not violence. The young officers listened carefully. They knew Admiral Cross had made the hardest decision of her career when she ordered the fleet to Dracor Station. They respected her for it. Colonel Hayes, still commanding Ghost Battalion from the shadows, trained the next generation of operators. His teams remained the tip of the spear, ready to go anywhere and do anything to protect human lives. The 40 operators who rescued Emma, Sophie, and Lucas received classified commendations. Their names were never made public, but they knew what they had accomplished. That was enough. Lieutenant Chris Morgan, who had carried Emma to safety, eventually left active service and joined Jake Morrison's teaching staff. He trained civilian crews in close-quarters combat and hostage rescue techniques. You probably won't ever need this, he told his students, but if you do, you'll be ready. The Wraith, the stealth corvette that had penetrated Dracor Station, was eventually retired and replaced with newer vessels. But the ship's name lived on. A new Wraith was commissioned, carrying on the tradition of silent, deadly efficiency. On Covenant Prime, the Council erected a monument to the victims of the slave trade. Thousands of names were carved into black stone, representing beings from dozens of species who had died in captivity. Among those names were the ones the ghost operators found too late, the children in cells who didn't survive to see rescue. Emma Rodriguez attended the dedication ceremony via video link, placing virtual flowers at the memorial. The galactic economy shifted in response to Earth's growing influence. Human goods became highly sought after. Human art, music, and literature found audiences across the stars. The species that many had dismissed as newcomers were now respected members of the community. But with respect came responsibility. Earth couldn't just focus on its own people anymore. When a Delphian colony was threatened by pirates, human ships responded. When a Torvian settlement faced starvation, human aid arrived. President Morgan, serving her second term, made it clear that Earth would be a force for good in the galaxy. We were helped when we needed it, she said in a council address. We'll help others in return, but we'll never forget our primary duty. Protecting our own people, especially our children. That balance between helping others and protecting humans defined Earth's foreign policy for years to come. Jake Morrison retired from teaching at age 65. He had trained over 1,000 merchant officers, each one better prepared than he had been. On his last day, his students gave him a plaque. It read, "Captain Jake Morrison, teacher, survivor, protector. Because of you, we're ready." Jake hung the plaque in his home in Colorado, next to a photo of the Crimson Dawn from before the attack. He looked at it sometimes, remembering his crew, the terror of the Krath attack and the miracle of the rescue. Lisa Chen and Danny Wright both retired around the same time. The three of them stayed in touch, meeting for dinner once a month to share stories and remember old times. Emma Rodriguez graduated high school with honors and a